Que vamos a hacer otro sorteo así rápido, que va a ser tirar unas camisetas. Toma, cuéntales por qué quieres tirarlas.
Hola, buenas tardes a todos. En primer lugar, quiero agradecer a Román y a toda la organización de la RootedCON por dar alas a este proyecto. Yo soy Fran y estamos creando una comunidad que se llama Hack on the Rocks, que lo que pretende ser es para vosotros, para que vuestro talento se haga visible, ¿vale? Para que nos pase como a mí, que fui a una entrevista y me dijeron, sí, vale, trabajas mucho, tienes muchos proyectos, pero tienes algo publicado. Entonces, pues, este tipo de iniciativa va en ese sentido. Todo empezó porque estaba con un amigo y le comentaba, no, mira, es que estoy haciendo una web que tiene una sección de noticias que enlaza a otros blogs de nivel nacional. A día de hoy son unos 50. Tiene una parte de una wiki que le llamo Vademecum, que bueno, los médicos pues tienen su librito ahí para consultar, pues porque los informáticos no vamos a tener pues una zona para consultar nuestras cosillas, para auditar DNS y tal, para que esté todo ahí centralizado. Y me dijo, bueno, ¿y por qué no creas un blog? Y dije, es que no tengo tiempo, no me da la vida. Si voy a escribir 3 veces al año, pues es un blog muerto. Entonces, no me da la vida de paso. Entonces, yo que soy ahora un asiduo al car sharing, que son los coches estos eléctricos que los alquilas por minutos, pues dije, pues esto si lo traspasamos al blog, pues puede quedar una cosa chula, blog sharing. Entonces, si nos juntamos 10 personas como yo que pueden publicar entre 3 y 4 veces al año, pues ya prácticamente abarcamos todas las semanas de un año. Y bueno, esto, como digo, es para vosotros, para que tengáis una ventana que se pueda mostrar vuestro talento y que nadie pueda decir en España que en España no hay talento suficiente o que no se quiera pagar por el talento. Muchas gracias.
Muchas gracias, Fran. Vamos a tirar las camisetas, las tiramos para arriba, ¿vale? Un abrazo.
Gracias, Raúl.
Muchísimas gracias. Bueno, no lleva gorro, pero es igual de desconocido que el otro. Raúl, siempre es un orgullo tenerte aquí. Eres, siempre lo digo, de las personas a las que más sigo. Hay frases tuyas que yo las tengo grabadas en la cabeza y las repito mucho porque me parecen súper valiosas. Y bueno, todo tuyo. Muchas gracias.
Muchas gracias, Román. Bueno. Muchas gracias. Luego os pediré otro aplauso, pero será al final, ¿vale? Bueno, como lo...
Okay, because the organizers love me, so they have just left me for the end of this conference, and that will be... I didn't attend the other presentations, okay, so I don't know whether you know what speakers do all the time. We are all the time changing and fine-tuning our presentation. Okay, so I've been getting this ready all throughout the conference, okay, for you to enjoy. All right, notice this, notice these details, notice everything in this presentation. Audio, please.
MI, ¿lo tenéis bien? A ver.
¿Pruebo? No.
No.
Bueno, yo no soy Juan Garrido, así...
I am not Juan Garrido, so I'm not going to tell any jokes. Because I will not get any close to how good he is. Okay, so just wait for the audio to be played. In the meantime, as I said before, I'd like you to pay attention to detail, and then we will link it to where we are heading, and then we'll also play a video, and I will tell you how far we can get and the dangers that we may face. Okay, so I'll move on to the disclaimer. So you've seen this disclaimer. Okay, we'll focus on it later on. Any resemblance to reality is purely coincidental and unintentional. This presentation was a challenge. Was a challenge for me. The challenge being that showing everything that I want to show to you without disclosing details of the manufacturer, of the vendor from which we will be analyzing an IoT solution. Some of the issues have not been fixed yet, and may be risky to disclose it, to publish it. So you know that I like demos, but if I do live demos, it will be just impossible for me to hide many of the information that I just cannot disclose today. Okay, so still not working? Okay, give me a sec. I'll try something else. Okay, try again. Apologies for that, it goes through HDMI. Oh, this is not Raúl's computer. Okay, so thank you very much, Roman. Okay. So regarding cyber munition, have you changed your way of seeing things? We are cyber weapons that manufacture cyber munition. No, not at all. What I wanted to emphasize, or what I wanted to say when I said that 2 years ago, was the following. Exploits and other tools that are available to us that were known as cyber weapons are not actually cyber weapons, because they expire very soon. It is generated by the weapon, but so the situation continues, and it for the worse. And I don't know, well, I don't know how to summarize it, okay? So the question is, when we are talking in the roundtable about cyber reserve and recruiting volunteers, we are not recruiting volunteers to paint walls. We are recruiting cyber weapons, collaborating with national defense or defense, okay? Well, the best defense is good attack, okay? We all know that that is that comes from sports, not from war, and that's why we will be using it in that domain when you really need weapons to defend yourself. So it is a cyber reserve. It is not for the military. It is not for war. So thank you very much, Raúl. I am a very aggressive person to a very prudent, okay? So I take your opinion in mind. The problem is not here. Okay, we could move on without the music, without the audio, but later on the sound is relevant, is important, okay? It should be working. Okay, yeah, it should work. Okay, that's what we pay them for. Am I right or not? Well, you've seen how aggressive I am. Would you like to discuss any relevant topic? Did you follow Tamara's presentation? Yes, I attended Tamara's presentation. Well, my presentation is also about it. It's about how we want the future to be like, how we want our society to be like in terms of technology, because we are all consumers of technology, and also, well, both legally speaking, socially speaking, and from a technological viewpoint. Do you all use Uber? Who uses Uber? Do you also use Deliveroo and takeaway services, home delivery services? And do you use Amazon? Have you ever considered the type of the change of model? So precarious jobs, okay? So, well, you are having someone delivering food to your home, but we are damaging the working conditions. Deregulation in some places makes sense, but in other places doesn't really make sense. In a society where everything is deregulated, the state doesn't really make sense, because there are no regulations, so you don't need anyone to ensure that regulation, to safeguard that regulation.
Vale, bueno.
Bueno, se oye.
Okay, you can hear me. I can use the other microphone if there's any glitches. What I would like you to think, if we use zeros and ones on a HUD for that video, what happens? That's what we're talking about. And now, if any of the characters in that video came to this event, they would have other opportunities rather than what you saw on the video. I did a disclaimer before, so I move into this IoT, Internet of Things. At first I used the word terror and there was a leak in my website. But anyway, it's up to you to define the terms. If anyone in Twitter wants to go ahead, there's different proposals moving around. It can be traps, tricks, targets, threats, turbulences, toilets. I'd like it to be, this is the conclusion I would like to reach. Internet of Things. This is where we need to test that the technical solutions that we want to implement are safe. And that will take us to the Internet of Trust. There's always the offensive part. There's always our comments about doom and gloom and all those things. But we need to do our best to ensure that these things are as secure as possible. Any IoT solution would look this way. It's got a bit of hardware components and other things. And what I will be talking about in my presentation is a methodology that was conceived by the ISMS forum as part of the research that we conduct in our group. I would like to say thank you, by the way, to Pedro and Raúl, Pedro Cabrera and Raúl García, for their involvement in the project. If you had to analyze the security of an IoT solution, what things would you focus on? This is the URL for the study. It's a PDF document. It's got quite a lot of details, and these are things we'll pay attention to: hardware components, firmware, cloud services, mobile apps, wireless communications, local storage, so on and so forth. A couple of years ago, I was talking about IoT, the IoT here. And we saw that security in IoT was rather limited. Let's see what happened since then. This would be really the second part of my presentation in 2016, certainly more advanced with more details. So let us focus on a typical solution for the IoT. So you know what we're talking about and we're on the same page. We would have a hub or central controller. That would be the element that allows us to connect with different worlds and allows the worlds to communicate with each other. Then we would have wireless peripheral devices that would be sensors or actuators. Either they monitor and they sense data, or they act on things. There will be cloud services because everyone wants to control everything remotely, obviously including mobile phones. Here we will have an integration with our phones, and if we want to interact locally, we will have a web interface. That would be the idea. To be more specific, we'll see an example, which is a domotic IoT solution. It's got the components that we mentioned. There would be an element controlling the wireless components and connecting to the internet, or remote control units, different peripherals which interact with the environment. That can be something that acts on the boiler, on the windows, on the doors, anything. Then we have the lighting system and the power plugs, and obviously the different physical integrations we have. And this is for you to control your home. Okay, so it's just you controlling your own place. Let's be clear on that. If we take a look at the data sheets from many vendors, they say for you. They say you don't need technical knowledge. This is one of the problems we encounter often. If the solutions offered in the market are not secure by default, and the users don't need any technical knowledge, well, I don't know about that. And then it seems that you can control your home from your sofa or from the other side of the world. Well, I'm a bit concerned about this. Now, talking about technologies, this Internet of Things, obviously we will have TCP/IP connections through the internet. We will have radio technologies. We will see a combination of 433 megahertz and 868. These are free frequencies that we can use in Europe for many different types of devices. And then we have transmitters and receivers and combined devices, transceivers. There's no Bluetooth, there's no Wi-Fi. Okay, we're focusing on other technologies. This is a layout of what we will analyze in the next few minutes. This is my blueprint, my basic diagram, in order to be able to control all the options we have: 433, 868, connection to the internet, the hub and everything. Okay, the main goal is to follow the methodology we've just seen. We have a limited amount of time available, and we could spend quite a few hours talking about this in detail. So I will just touch upon the basics. I will show you the direction which we should follow when analyzing an IoT solution with an end-to-end approach. So we know about all the security details, all the security elements, and whether we are achieving the level of security that we desire. So let's start with the hardware. Some of you are very geeky with hardware. It is always interesting to analyze it. This is not something I do all the time. It is not my main focus area. So it was a challenge. What we can see when we have different hardware devices, how far we can go, how they are built, and whether we will be able to get enough specifications for all these gadgets. There's different options. So we would start with this layout. Let's see the hardware for those bits and pieces. And this is the list: a central controller or hub, the remote control units. And by the way, when talking about the heating system, you usually have a temperature sensor. You usually have a module for the boiler, which activates the boiler. That's it. That's the two basic elements. And the thermostat you control using software through the hub. Lighting, an endless list of things. Plugs, sockets, lamps, switches, motion sensors or motion detectors, opening the shutters, opening the doors. It can be on-off or dimmers. You've got a large amount of different elements, and then the physical environment and access control, including the shutter module, the windows and the doors and everything. So, first of all, we would classify the devices. Are they transmitting? Are they receiving? Are they doing both things? Here you can think about the role to be played by the different types of devices. Obviously the hub plays both roles. The remote control unit is a transmitter, and the shutter, a blind that is getting the signal, is a receiver. That is the idea, okay? Let me now say something. About this, I have to thank my father. You end up hacking screwdrivers in this world. If we zoom in, we can see the screws that are used for the remote control units. How do you solve that problem? If you want to handle these devices, well, you set up your own screwdriver. And this is the type of things that I have been doing. I've been hacking screwdrivers. You modify the screwdriver the way you need, and that's it. Or you order a screwdriver like this through Amazon. But 15 years ago, that possibility was not there. Okay? So being able to have this capacity is something it's good to be aware of. Okay, so we start with the remote controller. It's got 3 channels, and it got something surface acoustic wave resonator. This has to do with radio things, and it seems to be working at 433 megahertz. That gives us a clue as to the frequencies we will be handling. And then the challenges. You see a component. I'll tell you in a minute how you find out about the details. This one, a radio chip, which is 611S21. There's nothing in Google. Quite surprising. Those that were born when Google was already there are probably struck by this. There's only one reference in Norwegian somewhere that talked about the frequency. The problem is that I have nothing else. There's no additional details on that gadget. Okay, so we'll have to live with it. That will be the remote controller. You turn it the other way around. There are 2 chips. The one at the top is the resonator. The one at the bottom is the other chip, the S21. Simple enough. So we take a look at one of the controllers for windows, doors and everything. There's a chip there. Perhaps I'm too old and I cannot read properly at a short distance. So magnifying glass would always come in handy. That's the main chipset. We will then need to see whether these components communicate with each other using radio signals or wireless systems of any sort. So you have to look for antennas. The antenna can give you hints as to the type of frequency you're handling. And then there are big condensers that have chips underneath. Beware of that. That is important when categorizing these elements. I took a look at all the components and then I started realizing this chip should have a microphone, a micro controller, a radio component. If there's a chip missing, you need to look for it. Receivers, what do they need? Some sort of memory to store the signals they're waiting for to be activated. So if you follow that line of reasoning, we've got little things here. Condensers, boxes that are power relays. You have no idea what that is until you try and recall your time back in university. Memories, memory chip, an EEPROM, regulators, and a microcontroller with its corresponding characteristics in terms of RAM and ROM. This is a logo that you can find in lots of electronic components, and it means that this component is recognized and it's part of a catalog. So it is quite likely that you will find additional details about it. Okay, the hub or central controller. This is the big chip. This is the microcontroller in here. This is the other one for memory. And then we see boards all over the place that are really interesting. This one, that has to do with radio frequency, small antennas, operating at different frequencies because the controller has to talk to all the devices. And then you have the other frequencies that are not licensed, okay? Not everything is visible, by the way. This one has a lot of daughter boards with transceivers that transmit and receive in different frequencies. See that the range is quite wide, so we will have to discriminate. The main chip from microchip is the interesting part. This one has Ethernet, USB, a larger amount of memory, obviously, because this is a central controller. The temperature sensor, same story. I'll take a look at different sensors, different versions of the same chip, basically, but microchip is the vendor. This is a typical stuff. And then we have a programmable integrated circuit. It's like a mini CPU, if you like. These are the specifications that I found. The main chip, the antenna. Let's take a look at another one, which is the heater or boiler module. You take a look, there's nothing interesting on one side. On the other side there's a power relay, another microcontroller, another board which resembles the other ones. It's quite similar. It's a bit different, but it's basically the same thing. The antenna and some interesting elements regarding radio frequency, memory, storage. It looks familiar because it is very similar to what we saw before. So let's go into the components for the heater boiler module. ROM, RAM memory, same type of radio boards as before. Then we have resistors, condensers, and things to make it work. Okay, we finally get to the power plug, which seems rather simple. Power relays, because the electricity is going through there, 220 volts, small antenna, and a couple of small chips in there. If we look at them, one of them can be read, the other one has no information on it. One of them is for memory, this is a receiver, and the other one, well, you have to think about it to see if you can guess. So this gives us quite a clear description of the components that are included, the technologies we are dealing with, how this is supposed to be working. That's the main goal, or goal number one. Goal number two will be about firmware and what to do with it. So let's focus on the firmware for the main component. Funny things that we should consider in 2018. No auto update capabilities. Here you have to find the latest firmware file through the vendor. It can be a .bin file. It is recommended that you do a backup of the current configuration first, because sometimes updates don't work properly. That's why they might not be advisable. We'll talk about backups in a few minutes, by the way. You use the web interface to enter the system as an administrator. It is only an administrator that can update the firmware. This is a critical action. And what we will see here is that there is no signature, there's no encryption, so it opens the door to basically everything. And then you see some references in the strings for the firmware pointing to a page that allows you to update it. If we take bin walk as a basic element for processing that unknown file, this is what we find. They might say microchop, it's actually microchip. It's just a typo. When I have 1 second free of time, I will get in touch with them. But anyway, and this is what we find. MPFS, which is the PIC file system, version 2.1. Images, compressed data, HTML documents. There is a web interface, so it makes sense. No encryption. And strings is your friend. Okay, let's go and find strings. Here we see versions, models, and things. This has been sanitized, let's say. These are not real values. So you can log in as a normal user, as an administrator, or whatever. These things we find look like passwords, but we don't really know where they come from. We don't know why those values are there. They're quite short. So anyone? These are hexadecimal values, but they're very short. If this is a hash, a CRC or something strange, I don't know, it's very short. It's funny because this PIC file system microchip from Microchip is the microcontroller. It's got a file system and you have a structure to store elements that are indexed, web pages with a number of variables of this sort for it to fill in with values at certain positions in those pages so that the performance is better. They give you a TCP/IP stack, a web server, everything is integrated and it is stored in the internal memory of the microcontroller of the EEPROM. 16 megabytes, I seem to remember, of external memory. This is rather funny because there's no encryption, no compression. You look at it and that's it, you're ready to go. The thing is, this is so rudimentary, so primitive, that when you think about the IoT replicating the mistakes that we made 20 years ago, it's absolutely true. And there are no tools to process that, that file system. There is a tool to process that file system that dates back to 2007. I got in touch with a developer and he said, I haven't touched that file system for 10 years. I can't remember anything to do with version 1. So this is pending work. The funny thing is that with binwalk, there is a signature to identify the file system, but there's no extractor. With strings, you can extract so much information that I didn't spend any more time on other options. But if you want to use an extractor in binwalk, it might be interesting. Here you see the format. Okay. Another option, if that was not feasible, if I don't get the firmware, would be a serial interface for debugging, the JTAG. 5 pins, this is another option. Okay, let's talk about cloud services. This integrates into a platform with cloud services, and it's important to say that there are 2 types of communications. One going from the user to the cloud. You want to control from your sofa or from the other side of the world. You want to access the automatic system and you use the cloud through your mobile application or through a web browser. And then there is communication between your IoT environment and the cloud so that the other connection can get through. We don't like leaving ports open, so we would like to see both acting as a client and the cloud acting as the intermediary, as a relay for both. Okay? So basically you have, you register in the cloud, and this was quite striking to me. I was thinking about security, so I was considering having a backup and a restore. In this solution, you can only do this from the cloud. You cannot do it from your mobile application, you cannot do it locally with your web server. You can only do this through the cloud. Backup can only be done through the cloud, which is quite peculiar. And now, the communication between the IoT and the cloud is quite peculiar because there is a proprietary protocol with some safe security limitations, but proprietary in short. You don't have to be techie. Okay, so just set it up and it works. Sometimes it's not as easy as it sounds. So let's focus on the communication between the cloud, the user and the cloud to see what we can find. First, if you have a server in the cloud, and you scan ports and you see all of these open, well, I would be concerned. If this is a server that is giving you control to an IoT environment, it should have the port open for IoT environments only, and not the port for email, for the proxy server, for whatever. It's the first impression that counts. You never have a second opportunity after the first impression. Oscar Wilde. I've been doing audits and pen tests for many years. This is like cooks. You develop your smell, your sense of smell, and you get a feeling right from the beginning. You start seeing things, sniffing things, and you say to yourself, I don't like this. I don't like the smell of this. So, one of the funny things that that I found during my investigation was that I had my user ID and my password, and at a given point in time, I couldn't connect again through the cloud using the mobile application of the web browser. You log in, you get a token for Open Authentication version 2.0 used for API requests. Instead, you get a JSON error. So after looking into it, I found out. So I was wondering, why is this error happening? Oh, well, the password was wrong in the cloud. The password was wrong in the cloud? So I spent some time. I think the vendor doesn't even know themselves why the password was wrong. And then you find out that if your password is greater than 25 characters, you generate an error. How is it stored to cut it down to 25 characters? No idea. It's in the cloud. But that's the problem. No one has long passwords in this environment. 1 million users around, no one has long passwords. So as I said before, you start developing your sense of smell, and it doesn't smell good, okay? So if you take into consideration the 3 things that I've mentioned in the last 3 minutes, this is my feeling. I don't even want to test it. If it happens, I don't want to see it. Remember that I told you that backup and restore capacity capabilities were only available through the cloud? Backup and restore. These are saved in the proprietary plain text format where you have the configuration for your whole IoT world. You have the passwords, you have the devices that have been registered with all the identifying codes, with all the rooms properly identified in plain text format. Okay, TXT. It is stored. So I started wondering, I'm not going to show you, but you can do reverse engineering for that file and you understand what each line means. You might be able to change it. Because well, if you want security in theory, you shouldn't be able to access backups from other people. If we can access backups from other people, you could do backups of other users, and at least they have a backup copy for when they need it. That's an option, a friendly one.
Entonces el planteamiento.
So, I said to myself, if you're another registered user in this platform and you access directly the URL in the backups, you will be able to get there. As I've seen in previous audits, I stopped for a while to think. And I was thinking, you cannot access the URLs without accessing the system first, without logging in anonymously. Yes, indeed you can. You can access information for all other users. With the complete backups that I have grayed out, this was absolute madness. All of them store there for 2016, for 2018, for whenever the backups were made. So that cloud doesn't look too good. It's a bit stormy. The weather is a bit stormy. And now I have that other protocol. Take a look at this. You're in the other side of the world and you access your IoT solution, but the port is not open. You know how this works. Your IoT solution communicates with the cloud. A relay is created to send traffic. Both of them are clients from one side to the other. That's the idea. And this was quite striking. They have a protocol which is similar to HTTP, something they made up or something I had never seen before anyway. They don't use any encryption, okay? They should use HTTPS or a proprietary HTTPS, whatever. There's no integrity, there's no tokens anywhere, nothing. It is enabled by default, it is a proprietary port, but take a look at this. You use a typical proxy for interception, and it doesn't work. Burp is focused on HTTP, HTTPS. If the other protocol is similar, but is not exactly the same, Yeah, it's basically HTTP, but with different methods. Well, this is the picture we get. You execute it, and burp tells you, the first line in the request I can't process, because there's no a get / whatever. There's something similar, but not quite the same. So, what works here? Using proxies for binary protocols, there's very little stuff available here. There is an interesting book on reverse engineering and network communication protocols, and then there's a couple of tools out there. Man-in-the-middle relay, this is the one I used. The man-in-the-middle relay is like a dumb client, it's a multi-protocol proxy. Whatever it gets, it encapsulates in HTTP to pass it on to burp, and that allows you to see things in burp.
Right, this is a request, and then this is the proprietary protocol, which is very similar to HTTP. So the method has been put behind instead of in front, and then you have headers, the same as we have in HTTP. So here we have the disclosure of the protocol, the version of the firmware, the serial number of the device. So there is a keep alive communication, meaning that you can handle the environment remotely, because it says all the time, I'm here, I'm here, I'm here, just in case your mobile wants to send out an action to your IoT. This is ongoing keep alive communication, and it is a protocol verifying keep alive. It is the responses are JSON responses. So this cloud is not encrypted. I repeat that again. Therefore, and now I'd like to mention Jose Selvi this morning. His presentation, he said, why are we so racist with man in the middle? Like, if we couldn't make them, that if we hadn't ever done them. So who will be in between your IoT solution and the cloud solution on the other side of the planet? Well, very many people may be there, and there is no integrity, there is no encryption. There you could change whatever you want to change. Are tokens used? Yes, some authentication tokens are, but because they are not encrypted, I could just get hold of them. You are not authenticated, but when you get the right token, you are authenticated. User name and the password. Well, this is the password that we saw before. It is not encrypted. And that gives you full access to the IoT environments. You can make whatever you want to do, backups or any type of remote control, same as the web browser or the app does. All right, so now mobile apps. So both from iOS and Android. I didn't really want to devote lots of time to them, so they do not look good. Well, you can easily guess that they are not storing encrypted data, so in a directory. And then in the case of iOS, I said I want to share that with you. So in iOS app, so this means that you have a mobile phone for which you pay 1,300 euros handling your IoT through an app. And then you have the authentication page on the mobile app, and it is using HTTPS and communicating with the cloud through the user and the password. I say, wonderful. So if you enter the username wrong, it says invalid user, and if you enter the wrong password, it tells you wrong password. So traditional, conventional user authentication in a 1,300 euro mobile telephone. But which is even worse is the following. If the username you entered does not exist, imagine that you typing a typo, so you go and write Raúl S, then it makes a post request without encrypting the username and the password. So you better know typing the wrong password and username, because it will be revealed in plain text. So what is the code inside doing to behave in this way? So it is so difficult to program it in that fashion. So it is just mind-blowing. All right. No. So web interface allows us to control a solution locally. So they don't use HTTPS either, but perhaps for some reason they don't like the S, or because they say, well, this is a microcontroller, does not perform well enough, I cannot control all the traffic. So what do we find here? We have a section where you can configure the device that at least requires access to the admin. Admin access will give you access to this settings section, allowing you to change the configuration of the environment. But again, there is no encryption. So if the user or the admin are authenticated and someone has permission to change it, well, they will get hold of the credentials. So this is the way it looks like when you access through the mobile app. It asks you for the password. Aren't you missing anything here? So username and password. Well, we know that the name of many usernames, but here it asks you only for the password. When you take a look at the code, well, it is asking for the username, but it is hidden, and that username is admin. So at the end of the day, that we know that the user by default is admin, you didn't even need to type it in, so they make it easier and easier for you. When you take a look at the functionality of changing the password, you see that the length is 16. So I am very much a killer. So these people, they do not allow to enter long passwords. Well, so they should all be put in a dark room. So, okay, so the password should be limited to 4 to 16 characters. Why are they limiting that to 16? Well, perhaps this makes sense. We will take a look at it. You continue to see pieces of code and they say, okay, MD5 password, comma 16. They say, what is that? MD5, that stands for 128 bits, and then 32 hexadecimals. And then you take a look at the code MD516, MD5 dot JavaScript. So you have a program, JSC, you create the JavaScript file, and then it calculates that for you. So this file is kind of obfuscated, and then it extracts all this. And you say, if age is 16, give me the substring between 18 and 16. Between 18, in between 8 to 16 characters. So these passwords that we saw in the flow, network traffic, and the string, and they say, hold on, this is an MD5. They are taking 16 out of the 8 character, and then the key for the user is 1, 2, 3, 4, and the key for the admin is the default one, admin, as you may expect. And they are handling all these like if it were high secret, top secret, and they are sending that out in plain text through on the network. Okay. And then the big bonus that I wanted to share with you is the following. I say I cannot update the firmware. Do you remember that there was a mention in one of the string about the firmware? If you want to update the firmware, you have to use this register, but to make changes you have to be an admin, but for that specific resource. For that resource you don't have to be administrator, no nothing. You go to that resource that is known something upload, and there you can update the firmware. And because there was no integrity, you create your own firmware with the logotype of the rooted, or you name it, and then you place it on your IoT environments, and which makes it much cooler. Okay, you can do all that with no authentication whatsoever. This is when I started doing intrusion tests back in the year 2000. This is, well, what is ahead of us is really terrifying. Okay, and now I move on to wireless and radio communications. I like this bit quite a lot, this part quite a lot. And here we see a combination of 4 technologies, 2 different ranges, frequency technologies, H68, reception, transmission. Okay, so very quickly I will tell you what it says on the screen. How to add new devices. So modulation, how to replay signals, Okay, I will move on to the demo so that you can see Opera Cake. I don't know whether you've seen my recent tweets. Opera Cake is this device here. Those of you who attended Pedro's presentation this morning, he talked about Hack RF quite a lot. This is a Hack RF with a case of methacrylates opening up the extension ports. When I received it, I was very excited. It is a prototype, it is not commercialized, and I got it from Great Scott Gadgets, Dominic Spitz. So it has full antenna plus a connector on one side and then full other ones here. It is extremely useful. This is an antenna switch. This is like Hack RF that can work from 1 megahertz to 6 megahertz. So here you can set antennas for different frequencies, and you don't have to plug in and unplug antennas all the time, or rather telling the Hack RF the antenna to use. Okay, so this is what we will be doing now. We will just plug it in so that you can see a light there. The only thing that you have to notice is that I have just set two antennas, a shorter one and longer one, adjusted for 433 and 868 frequencies. So once it is connected, you just list it, Hack RF finds it. Okay, I will do Hack RF info so that you can see it. It tells you the port that has used. This is Opera Cake, and then what would be interesting would be this thing here. This is the way we will program it. I will tell you very quickly. So we're going to say Opera Cake. You say each antenna has a number of, some numbers allotted to it, and you say, well, from frequencies from 100 to 900, use antenna 3, and for frequencies between 400 and 500, use antenna 0, please. And that's it. So the last version of the Hack RF tools does not compile this tool by default. You have to compile it in the Mac. So just, okay, then we have to tell him, okay, tell the device to specify the device. Okay, frequency list. Okay, give me a sec, please. So I often program it with IAB, and I say I connect port A, port B to different antenna, but this helps us manage the different frequencies. Okay. Okay, so yes, the option is -F. I don't know why. Okay, Opera Cake invalid option. But is it surprising because that's the option that's -F. I used it before and it worked. Okay, this document that I was showing you is the GitHub. Here we see the -F option. I don't know why it doesn't take it. As I say, I tried it before, it worked. Let's try it. Well, it tells us that that option does not exist. So for you to have a feel about how this antenna part works, you push the port. You say device 24. Goes to port 1. I am running it locally. I am running the binary here. This is binary. And actually binary is nowhere else. So it has to be compiled here. So should recognize -f. Well, the other option is to push entry port A 1, and then, well, if I get enlightened later on, it will find the solution. I will tell you why this is happening. Okay, it's compilation. This is the upgrading. So this is about setting the frequencies and tell it what antenna to use depending on the frequency. This helps us capture traffic on those going through those frequencies. Okay, we use Osmocom FFT to capture traffic on those frequencies. We say bandwidth of 2E6, frequency for 33.5E6. That it launches it for us. Any transmitter that we may have with give us the activity. By the time there is something generating a signal, for instance, this outlet here. Okay, perfect now. So let me change the frequency, see if we are lucky enough, if the temperature sensor gives or delivers some information. I can push it, and this temperature sensor sends in temperature every so often. I pushed it here because I just didn't want to wait. So notice these two transmissions, and you tell me about type of modulation or coding that is being used by each of them. As you may have seen, they are quite different, okay? We should not forget about that. So if we try to capture those signals, so we will play around with it, and it's very helpful for the analysis. So you capture the signals, for instance, for the control sensor for the boiler. So we use in spectrum. Just this is more complicated. This is more entertaining. For instance, you open this one to turn off the heating. So this is the turn on signal that we have captured. So here it is. So basically, I have this signal with these two of the signal with the two peaks. So I increase this, and here we see 010101 for both devices to be in sync, and then they start making the transmission. So it delivers, emits one value, another value, and what is being transmitted is being coded. And I'm asking it to switch itself off. And then the transmission is repeated so that we can ensure that the receiver receives it. So in 2016, I showed another modulation with other type of plugs or outlets. So that's basically about playing around with these parts. Okay, we go back to the presentation. So the devices 868 and 433 have to be paired with your environment. And the 861s are very interesting because even if they are receiver, you pair yourself as a transmitter. They are more advanced because they tell you about the status. They tell you whether it is on or off, whether the boiler is on or off. And they also tell you whether the lighting the LED is on or not. And then this goes through a process to start or to switch off the heater or temperature control. So what is interesting about this is the following. There's like the receiver will receive signals and will store them in the memory. And then you analyze that. Well, perhaps so you really need to, well, for instance, if the component has transmit signals, surely it is fitted with a chip. And then we have the receivers, and then they tell you about the state feedback. And then the hub is the attacker. It programs lots of signals and then replaces them. That is to say, sends them again. So that's the objective, that's the idea. Okay, what is the signal that we had for 433? What was the modulation that we had? We had a peak in 433, 992. This is what we saw in the specs. It's a very small peak. And what about this? What is it? Okay, please. Okay. Go for it. Give it a go. Well, it is modulation in amplitude. It looks like on-off keying. Either send in or not send in a signal. Okay, what about the 868 frequency? We have 2 peaks now, and it has these rabbit ears. What does this stand for? What is it? Go for it. Well, it is not a phase, it is not Q, it is simpler than that. It is in frequency, it is in a frequency. Which frequency? How many frequencies are we using? We are using 2 frequencies. It uses both frequencies. These are the 2 horizontal lines that we saw before. One stands for 1, the other one stands for 0. This is the way we code information that we want to transmit. So what could we do next? Well, we could do a script kiddie attacks. So this is what we did in 2016, but more elaborated now. That is to say, analyzing, interpreting signals, and creating a tool to reproduce that. So now let us take a look and see if we have the sound is back. Is it working? Could you please turn on the volume? So now I'd like you to watch these videos. Then I will move on to a demo. Of course, I couldn't bring with me blinds or others, okay? But videos are also sometimes good enough for researchers, okay? Okay, volume. Okay, this is the hack RF. We are grabbing a signal to manipulate the blind. So if we do double off, then that is stopped, and the next one is on. So this is a script kiddie. It is not working because I have to increase the intensity of signal because I may have grabbed it with some noise. Okay, so we see how the blind moves. Okay. Next one. So this is called Jackstit 1. Audio is important, please. Music on. Louder, please. So we are starting to understand the signal. We are sending the off sounds. This time we are not using the hack RF. So we have analyzed that with Spectrum, and the next step I will just create a script looking nicer like the one of 2016, but we will be sending in commands. And then you have your dashboard, your control panel to control blinds or any blind. If the person who was in the video before had been at the rooted, perhaps he would be more successful at flirting with that girl. Okay, so we also saw that the younger kid was kind of increasing the heating temperature. Okay, and here we are now. This is the most interesting part. Okay, so we have 868 megahertz. This is a flow chart. You've seen some this morning, shared by Pedro with you. Okay, this is again the script kiddie. So we will see Jack Testy and script kiddie after interpreting the signal. So I'd like you to notice many details here. So I'd like you to see what happens with the controller showing the status, and what happens with the heating. So if the younger boy had known this, perhaps the mother would not have noticed it, because he is not controlling it well whenever you are handling that outside the app.
Original, no se está enterando nada, con lo cual no se entretiene. Vale, ahora lo voy a activar. A propósito, veis, ahora sí está activo y dice estoy a on. Ahora saldrá aquí, esperad unos segundos, veis, estoy a on y está on. ¿Vale? Y ahora lo vamos a apagar otra vez para que veáis las.
Okay, we will turn it off, okay? So that you see just the opposite. You think it is on, but it is off. Thank you. I insist. This is script kiddie mode because I am transmitting this signal. What it is beautiful about it is to interpret it and to see what is happening. Okay, let us go for it, and this is the last video I have for you. Okay, we analyze it within Spectrum. Okay, we interpret the signal, we insert it in the script. So you see the signal being dropped and transmitted. Okay, now we go to off mode. So the solution is hidden. I just don't want to disclose the problem, not before it is fixed. So I refer to it as God, because you have control over everything, like if you were God. So please, okay, go on to the other device. Thank you. So this is very interesting. Well, we've seen that in the practical wireless radio hacking. So in 2016, told you about in spectrum. Some things have been changed. In the beginning, it was more vertical. Now it's more horizontal. And now very cool things have been introduced for this analysis. So, because, well, this analysis is much better made with G and U, well, after synchronizing the timestamp so that you grab the signal. But with this, I mean, that does not require something very sophisticated.
Pones aquí más o menos.
Pulses. You get here to see the baud rate or the pulses. You start rating those pulses. You start uploading pulses. So you adjust it a little bit. That's where it should be, more or less, one pulse for each one. So you say 1 plus around 111 microseconds. So you propagate that. That would be it. It's actually 104. But anyway, I'm just showing you the analysis. So we fine-tune it a little bit, like around there. So they get out of place. This is quite tolerant. The system is quite tolerant to deviations in the radio signals. So you have 3 pulses. There was one here. The longer ones, you don't know whether there's 2 or 3. That gives you the periods, the baud rates, so you know what parameters to be passed on to the IFCAT. Okay? And with this, we go back to the other stuff. But we now reach the conclusions. I don't want to be too long. I'll finish with this. Let me say it once again. The Internet of T. I think the best noun, the best name that comes to my mind is the Internet of Troubles. With all the things we've seen, that would be justified, but I would like us to do whatever is possible to change things and move into testing, and from testing into trust with more secure environments. You know that I love finishing with a little touch of Spanish proverbs, which will be probably impossible to interpret into English. Everyone in their own home and God in everyone's homes. That's what it says literally. Well, this is my brother playing around with things. He's helped me a lot with the music. These are the credits. Here I have Frozen, Back to the Future, Star Wars, Matrix. There's room 25 in Kinepolis, and I think he deserves it. I'd like to acknowledge the help of my family, and if you have enjoyed it, it is my family that has been behind the scenes. They've been putting up with me, with all this time and effort that I have devoted to this work. So the round of applause goes to him. It goes to them, not to me.
Y ahora sí, preguntas.
Now the questions, hands and bodies.
Ninguna pregunta. Ahí arriba hay una.
Any questions? One at the top, at the very top. Good evening, and thank you so much for this beautiful presentation. Very briefly, everything you mentioned on that case with that vendor whose name cannot be pronounced anyway, I'm wondering myself, because I've seen similar environments with different vendors in quite a fragmented market. Some of them are really small. Most of their products are discontinued in a short period of time. So I wonder if larger vendors like Intel, which is now working on these things, do they make the same mistakes? Is this a problem, a generalized problem affecting everyone, or is that a problem that affects only small vendors that don't have the necessary resources? Okay, let me give you some nuances. I would like to think that this is not a generalized problem everywhere. But I certainly hope that future solutions are more secure and put into practice the things that we have learned in the last 30 years so that we don't make the same mistakes. Now, this is not a solution that I picked at random, which happens to be vulnerable. We've seen little projects here and there, but this is a solution these guys have been working on for 30 years, not with IoT, but certainly with domotics. They have installed things in 1 million houses throughout the world, so this is a large vendor in this world. It doesn't really come from the world of IT like Intel and similar companies, but beware of this, okay? Things don't look as promising as they should, or as they could. There was another question farther up. One question. I was wondering, did you have a chance to take a look at the Home Assistant solution, which is a bit more open source? You can take all the modules in the market, you can flash them. If you've seen that option, do you think that is more secure? Yes, you need a little bit of work on the side of the user, but at the end of the day, you're not working with the original firmware from the vendors or with the cloud provided by the vendor. You update the components with the firmware made by third parties, and you keep everything under control in a better way. I do know that solution, but I haven't analyzed it. Correct me if I'm wrong. This is similar to that time when we had routers and access points, or we could use third-party firmware. Something similar that I saw myself as part of those Kickstarter projects was with multi-frequency hubs, which are compatible. In the cloud, there is a full catalog of vendors that allows you to reprogram those devices so that they can operate at different frequencies with codes from different vendors. So it depends on how well we do things with Home Assistant in our community, bearing in mind some of the problems we've seen here. I certainly hope that with the web interface we don't have too many issues, but I'm concerned about the wireless radio part. Unless you encrypt communications, and for that you would need smarter receivers that can decrypt keys, we would be in a very similar situation. There was another question down below. Yeah, there's two questions altogether. Hi, I really enjoyed your presentation, first of all, and I was wondering, you said that you needed additional data, additional information. I want to think that the information you got from the backups didn't include the geolocation for the homes of those users. That would be a very big problem, because you could raise or lower the shutters in a house, you know, for whose location you know. Well, luckily, there is no geolocation for those backups because the GPS is not enabled. But there is a component for heating that gives you the time. it goes into the API, into the map, the Google Maps API, to find out about the weather. If you want to use those capacities, obviously you need to tell the system where you are. I'm in this location, I'm in this town or city, and that information is shown in the backups so that the system can regulate temperatures. The IP address from where the backup was sent, will it be stored? The IP address, no, that is not part of the backup. No. We would have the internal IP address, not the public IP address, the one you have configured into your internal network, but not the public one after NAT. Yes. Raúl, you have a question there? As I understood it, when talking about passwords, you said that the system shortened them down to 16 characters. Have you tried anything about that to see how it behaves? Okay. The issue with the password for the firmware is that it takes the password, it takes MD5, and it cuts from character 8 onwards. With that, you can do whatever you want. It verifies that the value is correct. Bear in mind that this is a very limited microcontroller. There is no database for SQL injection. Fortunately, it is very limited. It is waiting for that value, and it matches against the configuration file. If you download the configuration file, you see the 16 characters it gets from the MD5 for passwords from everyone. If you had those, you would be able to access the device. The last question, and then I will ask you for some food for thought. Where is it? What made it fail with characters over 25 characters, with passwords over 25 characters? Well, MD516 is the one for the local server. Those above 25 are for the cloud. So they're doing something in the cloud when processing your password. I mean, I am aware of the need of security. My passwords are always more than 25 characters long. So I used a normal one and it stopped working. And then I investigated, and I found out that the reason was that the password was truncated. But they don't even know themselves. That's my feeling. The answer was, well, there was something funny with the password. We've reset it to 9 characters. That food for thought? Bearing in mind what is about to come, just a nuance. This is not what is about to come. This is here already. Okay, people are saying IoT is coming. IoT is coming in 2020, 2025. This is not coming. It's here already. I always tell people, Starbucks cups, which measure the speed at which to drink and how many times you go to pee. Who can we blame? How can we force the vendors so that they spend, they invest, and these things don't happen? Jorge Hurtado was saying someone should regulate. There should be a certification. There are all sorts of certification, and nothing happens. There's always the researchers that is blamed for publishing information about errors. This is very sad. There's lots of other things, but I didn't have the time. I've shown you significant things that happened 20 years ago that don't happen anymore. This is sad. Who would need to fix this? Everyone. That's the easy question, the easy answer. I think everyone. The vendor that wants to offer suitable solutions, that should invest money and time and effort, and also governments. In ISMS, within our group, we're trying to put together the requirements for a new seal, a seal of approval. HTTPS, if you know what it is, use it. So a set of minimum requirements. And as I said, governments should be participating actively in this. During the course, we saw this. The course that we did before Rooted. Yes, but Wi-Fi attacks, or the typical internet attacks, at least there is an IP address you can use or a MAC address you can use. Here you've got nothing. There are signals floating around and there's no addresses. If someone messes up with this, how do you go and find who it was? So someone must regulate and must kick these vendors out of the market if they don't meet those requirements. And then, I'm sorry to insist, we as consumers have a duty and we have a big power, but we don't do things jointly. If we stopped buying these things, this vendor would be kicked out of the market and all of us would win. Okay? It's like the evolution of species. The problem is that you're not saying what vendor this is. You're not telling us the name and you're being cautious. Perhaps I shouldn't be that cautious. Let me remind you about what you said in the past. I remember everything you said. I don't believe in responsible disclosures. I know what you mean. There is a very good friend of mine, Joshua Wright. He's got a sentence somewhere. I cannot quote him literally, but it goes like, the problem is vulnerabilities don't exist until someone releases a tool that demonstrates that they're there. And then people say, oh, well, we have a tool, we have detected a vulnerability. Until it is detected, it seems that there are no vulnerabilities. Since it hasn't been solved, I don't think it should be mentioned. Okay? I don't want to mention the name of this vendor. But yes, perhaps we should show the name of this vendor in red in the first light so that they can do whatever it takes to fix it. I'd love to find a way to use a stick and hit whoever needs to be hit to remind them of the things they need to fix. Thank you so much, Raúl.
No os vayáis.
Please don't go yet. Don't go yet. You know that this is quite difficult to organize. We have organized 3 rooms at the same time. These are the people. This is the organization at RootedCON, including photographers who are also family. They might remain unnoticed. Please go there. Make yourselves visible. I would like to say a big thank you for your hard work on this project. After seeing the number of attendees, we had never ever had so many people attending. We don't count people getting in and out more than once to say that we have 30,000 attendees. We have 1,860 that were counted once, and we're very happy with that figure. I'm very proud because of this project, and I feel like crying when I see how well you do everything. So thank you so much, and a big round of applause for them.
Y para vosotros, la fiesta es a partir de las 11.
For all of you, the party will be at the Morocco. That's in Marqués de Leganés number 6. You have to wear your waistband, your wristband. Okay? You can come with whoever you want, and thank you so much for coming.
Guapo.